Last week I had the pleasure of being able to present to a small group of CIOs at an event organised by a company called Winmark Europe. I'm just going to talk you through the presentation that I gave to them, which was all on the theme of consumerised innovation. So how do particularly IT departments embrace the opportunities that consumer technology and delivering technology to consumers offers to organisations. Now, to do that, I started by talking about three stories that for me illustrate some of the, challenges that particularly traditional IT thinking faces when confronted by both consumer devices in the form of things like bring your own device, but also in terms of how to do things differently with services that actually reach out to customers and to consumers. The first of those stories was when I had a conversation with the Director of Strategy for a mobile and digital agency called Isobar in London about 2 or 3 years ago. Now, Tim, their strategy director, was very excited as he told me about how, as a result of them recently moving into their new offices on Regent's Place, just off the Euston Road in the centre of London, that he'd managed to get an API into the building security control system, and from that being able to build a service which meant that staff at Isobar had the option to be able to, when they went in through the turnstiles in the office reception first thing in the morning, to be able to automatically be checked in on both Foursquare and Facebook. Now, a couple of things struck me about what Tim was telling me. The first was that I really didn't understand why anybody would want to do that. And that's more than anything a sign of me getting old and really not being able to understand the kind of geolocation elements of social networks. I've never really got into the checking in thing. And I understand that people do it, and I can't quite make sense of it for myself. But as I say, that's probably just my age more than anything else at this stage. The other thing that I found really interesting about Tim's story, though, was how in every organisation I have ever worked, that conversation that he had would have stopped at I got access to an API to the building control system. Because I cannot believe that any organisation I've ever worked for in the past would have allowed that to happen. Now, that for me opens up a slightly broader question, which is for particularly IT departments, if you're talking about innovation, actually are you structurally open to innovation, or would you be the people who would say no, you can't have access to that? A lot of the time experimentation, innovation comes from people doing things that others just can't see the point in, which is very counter to the traditions of a cost-benefit type investment case analysis that often precedes most traditional IT projects. And being able to get to a world where not only are experiments being able to give the chance to flourish, but also where access to services and information is given without there necessarily being strong detailed business cases, is going to be a big leap for a lot of organisations to be able to make. The second story is one that I've been seeing quite a lot over the last year or so, and it comes from where I've been seeing the Eventbrite service being used to help conference and event organisers manage their events. Now, Eventbrite, if you're not familiar with it, enables you to be able to organise the ticketing, the publicity, and then the check-in and registration for events, a conference, an evening talk session, whatever it might be. And I see a lot of organisations using Eventbrite to manage the pre-event activity of being able to get the event publicised, to be able to administer the tickets, to be able to get payment for tickets if the event is paid for, and to be able to keep track of who's registered and so on. However, when you arrive at an event, invariably the experience that you will have is very non-digital. It's people handing out lanyards and name badges and pieces of paper and handouts and all the rest, ticking people's names off on Excel spreadsheets, usually printed out Excel spreadsheets. Now, there's a number of reasons probably underpinning that. Having been involved in event management and event organisation over the years, one of them probably is that actually in most event spaces the chances of good stable internet connectivity are always a bit unknown, so relying all of your registration procedures on having reliable internet is a big gamble. But also event organisers have been doing this kind of thing for years, and so actually encouraging them to be able to change how they operate in the wild is very difficult. They can see the immediate benefit of doing ticketing online because it removes a swathe of administrative activities that were just really hard work and heavy lifting before. But on the day, getting them to be able to change how they operate to take more advantage of all this wonderful stuff that Eventbrite have written, nobody's doing it, nobody's helping them to change, and so therefore that change just doesn't seem to be happening very much. Bringing that back to an IT department, what is it that those IT organisations are doing to be able to actually facilitate behaviour change? I see for many IT organisations the great opportunity of the future isn't in technology, because cloud services and increasingly commoditised services and consumer devices means that we don't have to worry about the technology in the ways that we used to. If you're not delivering technology, one option is you don't deliver anything at all and you no longer exist. But another option is that you get much more expert in being able to help facilitate the business change that is needed for technology to have really deep benefit. Change doesn't happen by itself. We often think that within the world where everybody's learnt to use Facebook themselves, that those sorts of change behaviours will happen universally. But it doesn't work like that, and as the Eventbrite case shows, unless people are given the opportunity and the facilitation to help change, they'll stick with their existing working practices. The final question that then comes from a story is from an event that I attended back in November, organised by the telephony API company Twilio. Now, Twilio provide a bunch of services that enable you to build applications around telephony services, so being able to build in text messaging or voice handling into your application through a set of APIs that they provide. And it means you can do that without having to worry about involving, contracts with telephone companies or telcos or whatever else. Really interesting product set. They had a big European event with maybe about 500 people there in London back in November, and the biggest cheer of the entire day came at the announcement by their CEO that from that point onwards it would be possible using Twilio to send text messages to numbers that began 07. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, in the UK, our telephone numbering system is really complicated and people don't really understand it. Most mobile telephone numbers are numbers that begin 07. And because text messaging has traditionally been something that people do from mobile to mobile, it seems, and certainly the reaction of the Twilio developers seem to bring this home, that we as a population, or many of us as a population, have learnt a particular technology behaviour, and that is that you can only send a text message to a number that begins 07. Now, the problem that the guys using Twilio to develop applications were finding was that up until that point, Twilio would only enable you to use a number that began with what appears to be a geographic number, an 01 or an 02 number. And that was stopping people from using the service, because for many, they saw a landline number and therefore thought they couldn't send a text to it. Something was wrong and therefore they didn't use the service. Now, that was an incorrect assumption. You can send a text message to any number, but that sort of technology learning that has become embedded within the way in which people think can be really problematic when it comes to getting people to change the way in which they do things, or within an organisation to be able to get people to be able to do things that are going to give greater business benefit. So the final question then for IT organisations when it comes to thinking about how do we go about innovating is, what are you doing to actually challenge embedded technology learning within your organisation? Challenging the assumptions that you can only send a text message to an 07 number, or that you can only do certain activities using certain sets of software or certain sorts of devices. Now, my hunch would be that in many cases, actually, IT, because of the natural level of conservatism that there is in managing service delivery of ongoing systems, IT will be one of the greatest hotbeds of this kind of embedded tech learning. No, we can't do that because it's not the way it's done. IT organisations, if they're going to really help facilitate innovation within organisations, are going to need to go out and really start to challenge some of these embedded learnings that exist within the people that work within the companies in which we operate. So given those three questions, let's think a bit more then about what are the sorts of innovation that might be happening within an organisation and how might you organise and manage them. This comes into then a piece of work that I've been working on for the last 4 or 5 months, which I'm calling digital architecture. Now, my background, I've worked in enterprise architecture for a number of years, and I kind of have got to the point where I think that enterprise architecture is a discipline by which, where something is simple, if we can make it really complex, it will make it better. And there's a level of over complexity about enterprise architecture which I think is really killing the field. What digital architecture does is to think in very simple terms, in 2 dimensions, about the sorts of activities within your business, and then as a rough rule of thumb be able to think about the sorts of things that you might be able to get through innovation in those areas. Now, the 2 dimensions are core activities and support activities, and then internal activities and external activities. The core activities are the things that differentiate you from your competition, or in a not-for-profit organisation are the things that make you uniquely different from other not-for-profits. So within the context of a commercial organisation, the things that differentiate you might be your products, they might be your services, they might be the price points and the sense of luxury you have around your products and services. A really interesting example that came up at the event about a differentiator in the public sector. I was chatting to somebody who worked in the military, and laptops in a military environment are actually something that are core and differential, because actually laptops that need to be taken out into the battlefield need to be of a totally different sort and class to those that you'd use in an average office job. And so therefore that's an area in which they put a lot of additional investment, because it's something special and different about them and their business. Support activities can be seen as the cost of doing business, the things that everybody have to do, whether it be back office functions like HR or finance, or whether it's more generic activities like how you collaborate as an organisation. But the activities and particularly the services that support those activities are generally going to be focused around cost and efficiency and effectiveness, rather than the stuff above, which is about actually generating revenue for the business, for a commercial organisation. When we then think about the internal and the external dimension, internal services are those that are only seen within the organisation, external are the ones that touch to the customers. The internal stuff tends to be the stuff that is very ordered, is very process centric, and using the language that's from Taleb, it can tend to be very fragile. So we've spent a lot of time being able to build processes in organisations that enable us to be able to be effective and efficient through scale and through repeatability and through volume. And those are great, and they've reduced down the amount of variability that we have in our organisations. But when something comes that is out of the scope of those processes, it can cause them to fail catastrophically. The external stuff, because it involves customers, tends to be a little more, or in fact sometimes a lot more chaotic, and actually as a result can be very anti-fragile in terms of things that actually get stronger the more that people try to break them. As a great example of this, I put email. Email is a service which wasn't particularly designed, it kind of happened, and the way in which it's been used in organisations, it's a protocol by which lots of different things happen. And because it's very flexible, it means that it's been used in a myriad of ways to be able to enable communication between people, between systems and people, and so on. Now, I'm not necessarily saying it's good, but email is a sort of service that demonstrates those chaotic and anti-fragile properties in comparison to, say, a sales order processing system, which would be very ordered but also potentially very fragile. It's also fair to say, I think, that the internal domain there is the stuff that has been the domain of traditional IT and traditional IT systems. In the external side of things, we see much less clarity of ownership across organisations about the systems to support those sorts of business activities. And then when we look at each of these 4 quadrants at a high level, what I would say is that you have opportunities, different opportunities across the 4 quadrants for being able to do things differently. Down in the bottom left there, where you're looking at internal support type activities, generally things are going to be about efficiency. You're being able to look to be able to reduce costs, reduce time, improve throughput, and to be able to do things quicker, faster, better, cheaper. This is the domain of things like enterprise resource planning systems. There's a question about whether those have really delivered that sort of efficiency, but this would also be a domain where you would also seriously consider whether the services, the business activities themselves would be things that should be outsourced. When we then think about core internal services, this is how you innovate the overall service that you deliver to your customers. Now, if you're an organisation that really truly has customers at its core, then how you deliver customer service and the systems that support that would be part of your service innovation. And you could see how organisations have done things to be able to make sure that they use technology to be able to provide a better level of customer service. For many organisations, actually customer service is something that sits down in that bottom left hand corner, and it generally is about efficiency with a gloss on the outside to make it look like it's a better service. Up to the top right, and product innovation, this is where you're looking at the things that touch your customer that are core and differentiating to your business. And this is where we're seeing a lot of activity going on with organisations trying to use technology to directly reach out to customers. There's a lot of experimentation here, and this is on the right hand side more generally, where we start to get into more unknown, more chaos, and therefore more and more difficult to be able to use traditional cost benefit investment planning to be able to think about how you would actually manage these kind of innovation projects. It's also on both of those on the right hand side an area where really you should be looking at having a managed portfolio of different projects where you know that many of them won't succeed. You don't go into them thinking that they won't succeed, but you acknowledge that across the piece that you will have more failures than you will have wins, but the wins are the things that offset in terms of overall benefit. Finally, down the bottom right hand side there, collaborative innovation. This is how we use external facing services to be able to do more, to be able to support both customers, partners, suppliers and so on. I think this is an area where actually a lot of the activity we're seeing at the moment is around social networks. Now, within these four quadrants, of course, there are joins between them all, and no system generally will sit purely in just one of those quadrants. It will often be the case that where you will see pain in an organisation, as is the case with things like organisational design, you'll find the pain at the points where these different quadrants join. So, to add to the first three questions, there's then a fourth question, which is, are the things that you're trying to innovate on, or is your innovation in the right places within your organisation? So are you looking to be able to do things that are about generating new sorts of business, or to be able to generate better relationships with your customers in the right sorts of areas? Because if you're doing it down in the bottom left-hand corner, if you're doing it in the quadrant that's all about efficiency, you're going to struggle to be able to do things that mean a great deal. That's it. If you want to find out more, there's a link to some more materials and then some other reading from my blog around some of these subjects. Please feel free to get in touch with me if you have any more questions. Thank you very much.